We've all got that one friend or family member who snores, right? But what if that sound isn't just noise? What if it's a warning sign? A sign that something as basic as breathing is actually shutting down while we're asleep? Today, we're going to dive deep and unlock the real story behind sleep apnea. Yeah, it's so easy to just write it off as really, really bad snoring. But here's the thing. Sleep apnea isn't about the sound at all. It's about breathing, or more accurately, not breathing. So what is actually happening in the body when it should be totally recharging? Let's get into it. Okay, so if we're treating this like a mystery, the biggest clue, the smoking gun, is the pause. We're talking about a moment of complete silence. See, with sleep apnea, breathing doesn't just get noisy, it literally stops. And I really want to stress this. We're not talking about just breathing a little shallow or being a bit irregular. Nope. Sleep apnea means the airflow stops completely. And this can happen again and again and again, sometimes hundreds of times in a single night. Imagine what that does. It starves your brain of oxygen and puts a huge strain on your heart. This is the core event. Everything else we're about to talk about builds from here. So the big question is, why? What's causing these incredibly dangerous pauses in breathing? Well, our investigation leads us to our first suspect, a good old-fashioned physical blockage. The official name for this is obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA for short. And that first word, obstructive, it really says it all, doesn't it? It means something is literally in the way. There's a physical barrier blocking air from getting down into the lungs. Okay, so check out this chain reaction. It's fascinating, really. First, when you fall asleep, the muscles in your throat just relax. They go totally slack. For some people, this means the airway actually narrows and collapses on itself. Boom. No air can get through. Your brain, of course, totally freaks out when it senses the oxygen levels dropping. It sends this little emergency signal, a jolt that wakes you up just for a split second so you can gasp for air. That reopens everything, and then the whole cycle just starts right back up. This garden hose analogy is absolutely perfect. Think about it. Your lungs are working. They're trying to pull in air. The effort is definitely there, but the hose is kinked shut. The body is fighting to breathe, but it physically can't get the air through. Now, hang on to that idea, because our next culprit, well, it's a totally different story. All right, let's move on to culprit number 2. Now, what if the airway is wide open? What if the hose isn't kinked at all, but the breathing still stops? This is where things get really interesting, because we're moving away from a physical problem and into a communication problem, a missed signal from the brain. That's right. The problem isn't the plumbing anymore. It's the command center. With that first type, the pipes were clogged. But with this one, the brain just forgets. It fails to send the most basic command, breathe. This has a name, too. It's called central sleep apnea, or CSA. And that word, central, points directly to the problem, the central nervous system. I mean, your lungs, your diaphragm, the whole respiratory system is sitting there ready and waiting, but it never gets the go signal from headquarters. And this right here lays out the difference so clearly. With OSA, the obstructive kind, you'd actually see the person's chest and stomach moving, trying to pull in air against that blockage. But with CSA, the central kind, there's just nothing. No movement, no effort to breathe at all. It's just a dead still, silent pause until the brain's emergency systems finally kick in. So you see, they're two completely different problems, but they both lead to that same dangerous result. You stop breathing. So why would the brain just forget to send the signal? Well, it often comes down to how our body keeps track of carbon dioxide. You see, CO2 building up in our blood is the main trigger that tells us, hey, time to take a breath. But if that internal sensor system goes a little haywire, if it becomes unstable, then the signals to breathe can get all messed up or even just vanish for a few seconds. Okay, so we've got a physical problem, the blockage, and we've got a brain signal problem. But this is where the story takes a really wild turn. What happens when the two get mixed up together? This brings us to something called complex sleep apnea. And the craziest part about this one, it often shows up after someone starts getting treated for the first problem. So you have a patient with the physical blockage, OSA, you give them a CPAP machine, which uses air pressure to keep their airway open, and suddenly a new problem appears. They start having these central brain signal apneas.
It's like by fixing the plumbing, you suddenly reveal a hidden issue in the command center. It seems the body was so focused on physically fighting that blockage night after night that this underlying brain signal problem was completely masked. You clear the airway, and only then does the neurological issue finally show itself. So, we've talked about physical blockages, missed signals from the brain, and these weird, complex combinations. But what if these aren't really three separate things? What if they're all just different symptoms of one single larger system going wrong? It's time to pull back the curtain and look at the mastermind behind it all, the body's own control system. When you get right down to it, it's all about two core ideas. First, respiratory feedback loops. That's just the constant chatter between your brain and your lungs. And second, metabolic thresholds. These are basically the tripwires for oxygen and CO2 levels that tell your body when to breathe. Think of it like a thermostat. If CO2 gets too high, an alarm goes off in your brain that says, breathe, now. It's this incredible automated system that just runs in the background. Or at least, it's supposed to. And this, right here, is the big aha moment. Obstructive sleep apnea? That's a mechanical problem that messes with the feedback loop. Central sleep apnea? That's a communication error inside that very same loop. And complex sleep apnea? That's what you see when you fix one broken part of the system, only to discover another part was also faulty. You see? They're not totally separate diseases. They're all just different ways that this one incredibly delicate control system can break down. So let's end with this. Breathing is supposed to be the body's most basic automatic program, right? It's the one thing that should always be running in the background, no questions asked. Sleep apnea shows us that even this fundamental automation can fail. And that leaves us with a really critical question to think about. What does it mean for our health, for our heart, our brain, our day-to-day energy, when we can't even trust our own body to handle this simple act of breathing while we sleep?